So what I wanted to kind of discuss today is give you a little bit of information about zombies, the zombie apocalypse, and what you can do to prevent yourself from becoming a zombie, right? All right, so before we kind of get into the meat of this, we do need to talk about a few things. And we'll start this out with, what is a zombie? And I've had this question posed before many times. It really depends. It depends on your flavor of zombie. We've got the George Romero zombie, which everyone's kind of familiar with. If you haven't seen the old 1970 film Zombie, where he actually fights a shark, it's a classic. In 28 Days Later zombie, the Rage zombie, the guy in the background, he's trying to run for his life. That's what I would probably look like as well. The Walking Dead zombie, for all you Walking Dead fans, of course, is kind of a more recent stereotype of a zombie. Even more recent, of course, World War Z zombies, kind of the ants just piled in just really super fast zombies, which is kind of a unique zombie in itself. Sexy zombies are becoming pretty popular. Gnome zombies are also popular. The classic, my favorite, Bill Murray zombie from Zombieland. Everybody loves William Murray.
Actually, Rob Zombie.
Right. We've got Rob Zombie.
Yes. Do you have White Zombie?
No, but I do have Rob Zombie. So there's all kinds of different flavors of zombies, and when you think about it, they're just so diverse. The question is, well, how do you survive that? Because they're all so different. And where we get a lot of our information for kind of zombies has really been cinema. There is more to it, but kind of this big windfall of all this zombie nonsense, as some people call it, really is kind of stemmed from our love of cinema. It didn't really start with Romero. It actually started a little bit further back, as you can see, in the 1940s. But it was more of the Haitian voodoo zombie. So it's a little bit different. But as we continue on through the 70s and the 80s, we get into the Romero zombie, the ghoul, which actually they were named at first. It was actually the audience that called them zombies. It wasn't Romero. So we started seeing that these zombies were coming after people to kill them, and it wasn't until, I believe, the 80s where they actually started to eat brains. So the zombie has actually been evolving, and if you watch kind of the most recent cinema like World War Z, you've actually seen that they've kind of taken on another role, and that is kind of this fast zombie. It's not kind of your old school slow zombie. Okay, so things have actually changed quite a bit. When we look at a little bit of the history of zombies kind of outside the cinema, we actually see that zombie lore has actually popped up in many different places around the world, not just here. Where many of us kind of get the idea of, well, where do zombies come from? Well, the kind of original one we think of is more of a Haitian type zombie. But that actually came from Africa as well. So there was these kind of voodoo type zombie, which is kind of different because they're not really necessarily a dead person. The Haitian zombie is more of a person that's been put under a spell, or kind of the slave to the person that has cast a spell, this voodoo on them. But you can see it in other places. If you go over to China, they kind of have their own version of the undead coming back to haunt you, usually from, say, a bad death. Even in European nations, you've got the Revenant and the Draugr, in which these individuals were coming back from the dead, called them the undead, to seek revenge or come after some person. But I want to point out that there's kind of a difference in this historical zombie than what we see in the cultural zombie kind of today. And that is, these types of zombies come after one person, or maybe a family. But when you look at zombies today, they're not after just one person. They're just an opportunistic species. Let me just eat and kill whatever I can find. So there's kind of some interesting takes on how the evolution of where this came from, in terms of, well, our kind of old school folklore mythology behind kind of a zombie, and what it's actually become kind of our cinematics and kind of the way that we view zombies today. There's a lot of different ways that we kind of think of zombies today. Is it a viral outbreak? Is it a virus that actually is causing the dead to rise? Some go so far as to say it's nanotechnology that's going to bring the oncoming apocalypse of zombies? I don't know. We are getting some pretty cool nanotechnology going on. Hopefully no evil villain is going to make it into some crazy monster that we have to fight.
I'm sorry, but have you read human history?
I have, yes, this is true. There's another interesting concept that has kind of come to light recently, and it's due to this right here. This is a cordyceps fungus. There's a video game out, which I unfortunately not played because I'm an Xbox guy and a PS3 guy, so I apologize, called The Last of Us, and it goes on the idea that zombies are not viral, they are actually due to a fungus. This is the cordyceps fungus that you can find in a lot of your jungles in Central and South America. And what this fungus does is it actually infects this ant. It changes the brain chemistry of the ant and causes the ant to go up to kind of a high spot near its colony. However, if its buddies find out, hey, John's up there just hanging out, something's not right, they actually will carry him off. Because they know if John hangs out up there, that he's going to die, and this thing's going to come out of its head. Well, that is the fruiting body of that fungus, and it will then spread spores all over the colony. So it's kind of a neat take on, because they do call this kind of the zombie fungus, because it does this to many different species, not just ants, spiders, moths, grasshoppers, walking sticks, you name it. There's just as many of these types of fungi in the jungles as there are insects, which is really kind of crazy. We're barely scratching the surface as to how many of these different fungi there are. So these things, hopefully they don't transfer. But that was kind of the idea behind this new type of zombie you might be hearing about. That, okay, let's say that this thing begins to attack humans, and it then causes us to become kind of a zombie-like with the idea that, well, how do we infect? By spores, that our head's going to break open, and there goes all these crazy spores. And I've thought about this because I teach this in my class, and I'm like, okay, well, we've got an immune system that could probably fight it off pretty well, maybe not. And then I thought, actually this morning at about 4:30, sitting in bed, I'm like, aha! Boom! That's how we survive. That's how we survive that virus. So, just spray yourselves down every day. You should
It affects the head, and we're going to do this with a foot spray?
Well,
Never mind.
you just bathe in it first and hope you don't have to.
There's actually a shampoo called Nizoral.
So it won't be the first time.
I actually have my own personal zombie that I've come up with that I call the not dead, undead hypothesis. This is my personal take on a zombie. Being a biologist, it's really hard for me to say, oh, the dead come back from the living. It's a little much for me. So I'm kind of breaking the zombie mold as to what hardcore zombiers really like. And I try to explain it in the sense that it's not really the undead that's coming back, but it's the infection, kind of like 28 Days Later. After I've watched many films, this is kind of where this idea evolved that for my personal zombie, the not dead, undead, is more of a viral infection that leads to symptoms that are very zombie-like. So I actually run a blog that I discuss this and talk about it, and I also post articles and stuff about what you can do to kind of survive this type of outbreak. But if you've never watched Contagion, I highly advise you do so because it's probably one of the most accurate ways that the CDC would actually respond to some type of biological outbreak. And that's not just my personal opinion. I've heard many doctors that work at CDC and infectious disease, WHO, that said that's probably the closest you'll see in a film as to how we would actually respond to some type of biological outbreak. The Crazies was a remake, but I enjoyed the newest remake and not the older version. But like I said, my idea of this kind of came from these three movies and other things in my brain, thinking about biology and all this stuff, about how it would really function. So for me, where I kind of started out was the rabies virus, which most of us are pretty familiar with. Rabies is kind of interesting because the history of rabies goes back quite a long way. I was actually reading an article this morning that discussed biological warfare using rabies, where Leonardo da Vinci was talking about mixing these vast pots of arsenic and rabies, which they, was rabies, they just call it like this mad dog saliva, and using this to kill your enemies or tip your arrows with it. So when you shot them, oh, guess what? Now they go crazy because they have rabies. And the modern day zombie itself kind of typifies what a rabies virus is. So let's think about what a virus is. It's non-living. It has a little bit of genetic information, and its sole goal is to make copies of itself, right? Well, what does a zombie do? It's dead, and it makes copies of itself. So really, the parallels are there, and that's kind of where our modern-day zombie has actually come there, is that it's actually putting this idea of transferring that logical virus does. You put it on the hands, it can take your arms or legs. If you're not familiar with the rabies virus affecting you, which is great, because that's kind of a lag time. That's why you can go and get shots and you're okay. But if you get a bit closer to your central nervous system, the time is not so great, because that virus has to work its way up, if you're bit on the arm, to your central nervous system, and then it begins to affect the brain. The symptoms of rabies is pretty nasty, as you can kind of see here. You get kind of this phobia of swallowing, which is why you see animals foaming at the mouth, because they don't swallow. You also see them going kind of crazy and attacking everybody or being very, very angry. This can also happen in humans. There was a report from in India about 2 weeks ago where a gentleman had rabies, and they were tying him down, and he bit one of the orderlies. Now, whenever I read that, I was like, oh my God, we've got to go. It's zombies. They're coming. I knew it. I knew it. But, you know, unfortunately, he's probably not going to make it because it's too far gone. When symptoms present in humans, there isn't a lot you can do. There has been some success in putting you into an artificial coma for about a month or so, and then letting your body kind of work through it, and then they bring you back out and kind of hope for the best. And there's been some people that have done that and come out just fine. There's a young girl, I believe she was around 13 years of age when it happened, but she had to go to a lot of physical rehabilitation once she came out of that coma. So pretty nasty virus, but this is kind of the behind the scenes where a lot of zombie fiction and films kind of really take root. And I think it's a good place to start, because it is one of those viruses that if it does develop, you can see many zombie-like symptoms. So if you ever see kind of a zombie outbreak or something, I highly suggest that we go ahead and kind of move to this where we're trying to protect our face and mouth, because what if it's not transferred by bite, but airborne? What if it is a virus that's airborne? That's something to kind of think about.